Hello, you absolute legends. What is it about speed that compulses man to pit himself against his contemporaries to see who can do things the quickest? It has seemingly always been this way. Paintings and decorations depicting races of various natures stretch back to ancient history and beyond. It doesn't matter what it is, if it can be raced, it will be. Thus, it is of no surprise that with the advent and rise of video games in the last 50 years came a new domain of speed-driven competition. Known simply as speedrunning, the premise is simple: beat the game as quickly as possible. In recent years, the popularity of speedrunning has been skyrocketing, with YouTube videos on the discipline attracting millions of views. On the streaming service Twitch, speedrun marathons attract hundreds of thousands of viewers. The niche has been consistently growing at an incredible rate, and looks poised to become even more mainstream in the coming years. But speedrunning is very different now to what it was in its infancy. When I started vying for video game world records in the late 90s, the word speedrun was not even in our vernacular. Changes in technology have shifted the speedrunning landscape dramatically, taking the pastime from merely a fun competition between online associates to a venture that has formed entire careers. Many speedrunners today are now professional gamers, something that I would have never dreamed possible in my youth. In this video, we are going to go back in time and highlight the key transitions that shaped this unique brand of gaming. We will share some of the most special moments that define what speedrunning is all about, and I will let you in on who I believe is the most influential speedrunner of all time, and you will never guess who it is. I hope you enjoy. When it comes to pinpointing the genesis of speedrunning, many people reference the video game Dragster on the Atari 2600. Released in 1980, it was one of the first games to actively promote competition among players. The manual that came with the game stated, "If you break 6 seconds, take a photo of the screen and send it to us. The world record is 5.61 seconds. If you break that, it will make news." While it is true that players tried to beat Dragster as quickly as possible, I wouldn't consider this speedrunning. People were playing the game merely as it was intended, as the entire premise of a drag race is to finish as fast as possible. There have been thousands upon thousands of racing games developed, and of course, anyone who plays them tries to go fast. But that doesn't make them a speedrunner. Competitive gaming in the 80s was restricted entirely to high scores. You did what the game told you to do, and you didn't stray from the core premise. If the game had a score counter, you tried to make it as large as possible. If the game had a timer, you tried to make it as low as possible. You worked with what the game gave you, and you used the metrics that were already built in. Racing games weren't the only type of video game that introduced the element of speed as part of the gameplay either. Consider a game like Prince of Persia, released in 1989. Here, the player has 60 minutes to save the Sultan's daughter. This forces the player to move quickly and keep their pace in the forefront of their mind. But again, just because the player is trying to rescue the Sultan's daughter as fast as they can, that doesn't necessarily mean they are speedrunning. The reality is that many games in the 80s forced you to move with haste. It is a vestigial mechanic left over from coin-operated arcade games. Arcade developers needed a way to limit the amount of time a player could spend on a machine with a single quarter. So they designed games that made time wasting a death sentence. With games like Pac-Man or Donkey Kong, if you stop moving, it's game over. Where it wasn't possible to make the game over screen inevitable with enemies or in-game mechanics, developers would make it a certainty by implementing a time limit. This forced players to move quickly, dragging them against their will through each level. There was simply no choice, and choice is the key ingredient that in my opinion truly defines speedrunning. Speedrunning as a concept is the conscious decision to move through a video game as quickly as you can, not because the game is forcing you to, not because the premise demands it, but because you value the idea of speed, regardless of what the developers intended. This distinction of choice, intentionally introducing a new element of speed, wasn't seen in gaming for a very long time. However, this idea did start to slowly creep into the global consciousness in the late 80s. In 1986, Metroid was released for the Famicom. Metroid is an action-adventure game with an emphasis on exploration. The goal of the game is to collect power-ups and gain access to new areas, and eventually destroy the Mother Brain, the game's final boss. The player can explore as long as they wish, and there is no time limit counting down, forcing them to act quickly. Neither the story nor in-game mechanics necessitate speed. If the player does choose to complete the game quickly, they are rewarded with different endings depending on how long they played, allowing them to replay the game wearing different suits. This arbitrary goal is one of the first examples of speedrunning as a concept being manifested, but it wasn't until the 90s that speedrunning as a competition finally began. In May of 1992, a relatively small developer by the name of id Software released a game that would usher in a brand new genre of gaming. Wolfenstein 3D is considered to be the grandfather of first-person shooters, and its impact on gaming culture is undeniable. It was programmed by just two men, John Carmack and John Romero. Carmack was the ultimate programmer, and was largely responsible for the technical advances that made such a game possible. Romero, on the other hand, who was obviously still a talented programmer in his own right, was the ultimate gamer. He took gaming very seriously. He was incredibly competitive, and he was also a speedrunner. Romero felt that speed was the ultimate demonstration of skill, and his competitive nature led him to infuse this philosophy into his games. After completing each floor in Wolfenstein, the player would be given their final time. Romero himself also provided a par time, a goal for players to try and beat, and if they did, they would be awarded extra bonus points. In the official hint manual, the record time for each floor was displayed. It also included John Romero's current record for finishing episode 1 is 5 minutes and 20 seconds. That's not going for anything but the fastest path to each elevator. He welcomes challenges to this record. Accompanying this were also some basic speedrunning strategies. Wolfenstein had many ingredients that could have made for a great game to speedrun. It had an inbuilt timer, it had a goal to beat, and the challenge had been laid down by Romero himself. But for a game to truly shine in this niche, there is one element that is absolutely essential, and that is great controls. Wolfenstein was innovative, but it was clunky to play, greatly restricting its appeal as a competitive game. id Software's next project, however, would be a different story entirely. Doom was released in December of 1993. In almost every regard, Doom is light years ahead of its predecessor, and it's nothing short of amazing how much id were able to achieve in such a short time. In contrast to Wolfenstein, Doom's controls are a joy to play. Doom Guy is quick, responsive, and moves intuitively through space. The level timer and par timer are carried over as well, teasing every player with the idea of finishing each level quicker than they had before. Not only this, but now players could record their runs as demo files and play them back. The internet was still young, but it was rapidly growing in size, and many gamers were beginning to come online. People began to share demo files through the internet and to discuss the game on bulletin boards. It was at this point that speedrunning had everything it needed to flourish. The internet provided a way for people to immediately share achievements and to discuss strategies, therefore facilitating a thriving community. Demo files allowed players to easily prove their claims, increasing the validity and credibility of the hobby in general. Doom as a game had solid enough gameplay mechanics and interesting levels that helped to foster complex strategies and enjoyable competition. But beneath all of this was an idea that speed was equivalent to skill, an idea that Romero believed in and championed. Doom didn't need to have a timer, nor a par time, but it was Romero's passion that led to his decision to include those in the game. And it's for this reason that I regard Romero as the most influential speedrunner of all time. Doom, and subsequently Quake, facilitated the first bustling online speedrunning communities. Players would theorycraft strategies, compete for the fastest times on each level, upload their demo files for everyone to appreciate, and generally share their love of the game. They weren't the only communities though, and by the turn of the century the concept of speedrunning had spread, and many games had their own dedicated group of speedrunners. GoldenEye 007, Mario Kart, F-Zero, Metroid, all had active message boards with players trying to push the games to their limits. When Perfect Dark was released in the year 2000, it had hundreds of speedrunners by the end of the year. All of these games had one thing in common though, they all had an in-game timer, and speedrunning was by and large restricted to games that came with a timer built in, as this was the way players timed their speedruns. It didn't matter if it was speedruns for individual levels, as was the case with Doom, or if it were for full game runs, as was the case for games in the Metroid series. Your final result was whatever the game told you. This was about to change though, and this shift would coincide with the expansion of a demo hosting website named Speed Demos Archive. Speed Demos Archive, or SDA for short, was the website for Quake speedrunners to host Quake demo files. One of the founders of the website, known as Radix, was a prolific Quake speedrunner, submitting hundreds of demos. But when Metroid Prime came out for the GameCube in 2002, Radix decided to put together a speedrun using strategies he had read on message boards. Once completed, he needed a place to host the video so people could download and watch it. Given that he already had a website at his disposal, he decided to post it on SDA. His speedrun went viral, with gamers across the internet sharing it on various message boards. People were amazed at both the high level of gameplay and the game-breaking strategies that were being used. It was obvious there was a demand for this unique style of gaming, and shortly thereafter, Radix allowed speedrunners of other games to use Speed Demo's archive as a place to host world record runs. Before the expansion of SDA, several gamers had started to dabble with the idea of speedrunning games that did not include an in-game timer. This method of using a real timer instead of the one that was programmed into the game was called Real Time Attack, or RTA. But these gamers were few and far between, scattered randomly across the internet. Some players used the forums on Twin Galaxies, the high scorekeeping organization. Others used the message boards on GameFAQs. But these websites weren't dedicated to speedrunning, so when SDA opened its doors, speedrunners from around the world started flocking in. Now speedrunners from any game had a place to call home. And not only did SDA provide a way to highlight their achievements, but it also contained its own forums for players to converse. It helped to standardize the names for different speedrunning categories, such as 100% and any%. These names carried over from the Metroid series, which displays the completed percentage at the end of the credits. 100% is self-explanatory, and any% means that there are no requirements. These terms are now used in most games to indicate the type of speedrun that is being performed. The popularity of SDA helped give a voice to speedruns of games that were previously neglected or unknown by the wider gaming community. In the years following 2004, SDA accepted speedruns for hundreds of games. Notably, it increased the visibility of games like Zelda, Ocarina of Time, Super Mario Bros., and Super Mario 64, games where RTA timing was the only option. Speedrunning was no longer restricted by in-game timers, and now more people were beginning to realize they could speedrun any game they wished. All they needed was a stopwatch. Between the years of 2004 and 2008, speedrunning expanded dramatically, and the foundations of many communities were built. Technology was advancing as well, and the introduction of streaming platforms would again usher in a new era of speedrunning. Several streaming platforms started to gain traction between 2008 and 2010, but it was after the creation of Twitch.tv in 2011 that the streaming of speedruns really started to explode. In its early days, speedrunners were some of the most viewed streams, attracting thousands of viewers. While the public had previously been able to marvel at the videos hosted on SDA, this was the first time they could witness firsthand what it was like to grind for a world record. They could actually be there and share the moment with others when the record finally happened. Whenever a runner was on world record pace, viewers would spread the word in chat rooms and other streams, amassing huge audiences. One of the most popular at the time was the Super Mario 64 speedrunner Siglemic. He would often grind 12 hours a day, and when he had a run that could potentially beat his personal best, it wasn't uncommon for him to pull over 10,000 viewers. This was without webcam or even commentary. People were just so mesmerized and entertained by the sheer level of gameplay they were seeing. Some of the most iconic moments in speedrunning history happened on Twitch. Moments like Narcissa Wright achieving a time of 18 minutes and 10 seconds in Ocarina of Time. This was the culmination of years of dedication, not only from Narcissa herself, but the entire community. Every record is the sum total of thousands of hours of work to improve strategies and perfect movement. Being able to broadcast that moment in front of thousands of people is a beautiful thing. Moments like these capture the imagination and excitement of everyone, which is why they are often reported on through gaming news outlets, and moments like these have helped tremendously in increasing the reach and appeal of speedrunning. Streaming became a staple for speedrunners. Not only was it a way to demonstrate your skills with a wide audience, but it also enabled speedrunners to earn a living. For the first time in speedrunning's 20-year history, we began to see professional speedrunners. Players who were able to devote themselves completely to mastering their craft, and the level of play skyrocketed. Twitch also facilitated another type of exhibition in the form of speedrunning marathons, most notably Games Done Quick. These marathons would focus on highlighting as many games as possible with an emphasis on commentary and entertainment. Their purpose was to appeal to a wider audience and raise money for charity. Games Done Quick first began in 2010 before Twitch even existed, but it took several years for it to really cement itself. It now attracts hundreds of thousands of viewers each marathon and raises millions each year. The introduction of live streaming was a game changer for speedrunning and helped it to grow significantly. It definitely impacted the lives of speedrunners who now stream almost daily. But there is another platform that has completely eclipsed Twitch in terms of reaching new audiences, and that is YouTube. When it comes to finding game-breaking glitches, none do it better than speedrunners. The amount of deep knowledge of a game's code that is required to both find and take advantage of some of the glitches speedrunners use is insane. The expertise needed to understand what is happening during even the most elementary speedruns is very significant. For many years, casual viewers were entertained by top-level play, and they were happy to join speedrunners on their world record grinds. But one thing that was absent was a way for them to truly appreciate just how much speedrunners knew about each game. Knowledge was stored throughout thousands of message board posts, and was only compiled in the minds of the top players. Speedrunning needed a voice, an intermediary that would communicate complex ideas to the masses in a way that was easy to consume. Originally, this voice would come in the form of commentary during speedruns, like those seen in Games Done Quick, but these were long and unpolished. Eventually, around 2015, YouTube saw the first scripted, well-produced videos outlining and explaining the advanced glitches that speedrunners had discovered. Channels like Strider7X and Pen & Coke 2012 started to make amazing videos which gathered millions of views. One thing was clear: people loved hearing about the crazy things that speedrunners had discovered. In late 2016 and early 2017, more channels started gaining popularity. Channels such as Easyscape, Apollo Legend, and Summoning Salt, the latter of which creating a documentary series outlining the world record progressions of popular speedrunning games, which millions of people have watched and loved. Whenever the exploits and achievements of speedrunners are packaged and explained well, people listen. Speedrunning content on YouTube is now receiving millions of views every single day, and new people are always becoming aware of just how fascinating it can be. The discipline of speedrunning began almost 30 years ago. It's come a long way since then, and it's about to go further. In the last year, we have seen a new form of competition begin to emerge: live competition. Races have always existed in speedrunning, two or more speedrunners going head-to-head to see who can finish first, but surprisingly, it's only recently that organizations have started to take live races seriously. We are now seeing legitimate, professionally made events that showcase speedrunners and pit them against each other head-to-head. What we are seeing is the birth of speedrunning as an esport. In 2020, a brand new type of tournament has arisen as well. In January, the European Speedrunner Assembly produced Break the Record Live, bringing together the world's best speedrunners to try and beat the world record in a live tournament setting. This created one of the most amazing moments in speedrunning history.
Oh my God! Cheese, you're a legend! You are a legend, Cheese! Oh my God, you are a legend! Oh my, dude, my heart was beating. I'm gonna stay here, just be a little bit professional, but dang, Cheese. Dang. Dang. What a legend.
This unique format of speedrunning competition was so successful that ESA is teaming up with cybersecurity company Kaspersky to bring it back for round 2. This time, 7 of the world's best Doom Eternal players will go head-to-head to beat the game without using major glitches. If you watched my last video on Doom Eternal, you'll know how crazy those Doom runs are, so you definitely don't want to miss this event. This event will be held on the 26th of July, and I've put a link in the description that outlines all of the details, so make sure to go and check it out. Live events are the future of speedrunning, and they are the path that leads to speedrunning's legitimacy being cemented in gaming culture. As time goes on, the speedrunners that prove themselves against their contemporaries will be immortalized as the all-time greats. Competing against yourself is one thing, facing off against the best in the world is something else entirely. Speedrunning continues to grow in leaps and bounds each year, and there is no sign of it slowing down. Every new world record is a story of determination, discipline, and execution. As these stories are told, more and more people will begin to appreciate the hard work that goes into demolishing our favorite games. One thing is certain, big things are coming, and I can't wait to see what happens next. Thank you again for watching, you legends. I hope you are having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next video.